All right. Well, good morning, and thank you so much for joining us today for our first ever podcast here. I'm a Cyber Up. My name is Tony Bryan, and I have the pleasure from day to day to run this organization, and hopefully over the next couple months and going forward, the opportunity to bring really smart, great people together to talk about apprenticeship and talk about youth engagement. And I think everything we all know is needed around cybersecurity. So today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Rick Tracy. He is the CSO of Telos Corporation and has a laundry list of amazing things that he's accomplished so far, right? 33 years of experience in the industry. He's an official member of Forbes Technology Council. He's a member of the Global Cyber Alliance, and he's also a mentor at Mach 37 Accelerator, focused on bringing some of the best and brightest cybersecurity startups to the forefront. So Rick, I want to say thanks for joining us this morning.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So before we jump into Rick, I thought I'd maybe provide some context of what provoked our conversation originally, right? So I think like most organizations, we've got Google alerts and we're scouring LinkedIn and all kinds of great resources for content to share on our social media. And as we were doing that, one article just kind of jumped out at us as relevant to what we were doing as an organization. And the title is Corporate Social Responsibility is Key to Closing the Cybersecurity Talent Gap. I read it and I was like, man, he just wrote an article about us and really had no idea who we are. So it seems crazy he doesn't. So I reached out on LinkedIn. Rick and I had a great conversation, and I invited him to be our first podcast guest. So thanks for doing that. Thanks for your flexibility. But, for everybody that's listening, I'd love to have you tell them a little bit about yourself, how you got into the industry, and, maybe even what provoked you to write the article.
Yeah, well, like you said, I've been in the industry for 30 plus years. I've been with this company for Telos Corporation for I've been with this company for 33 years. So I did things prior to that as well, but been primarily my work has been involved with Telos Corporation, and I was exposed to some security work in the late 80s, doing some things for the Department of Defense. That a couple things I thought that the things that the Department of Defense was doing wasn't necessarily beneficial just to the government. I was looking forward to the more extended use of the internet, and in my mind anyway, and it was really early, and it didn't resonate until years later. But my thought was the things that we were doing for the Department of Defense would make sense for commercial industry. Furthermore, the things that we were doing for the Department of Defense, I think, really lend themselves to automation. And just my mindset is always about automate as much as you can. So all of these things sort of led to some ideas that resulted in a spin out of sorts from Telos called Xacta, that resulted in some technology that resulted in patents. We demoed this to the analyst industry in the early 2000s, 2002, I think, and some of the analysts give us credit for kickstarting what's now known as the IT GRC industry. So that's one side of my life, and I'm still involved with the evolution of this platform called Xacta, which is not a spin out anymore. It's all under the Telos umbrella. Telos is a cybersecurity company. So I have this responsibility for product management, if you will, for Xacta. How to bring more capability to our users. But I also, as you mentioned, I'm the chief security officer and have had that role for probably, 13 or 15 years. We were really early. The CEO here was really forward-leaning and recognized the need to have someone corporately responsible. I report to the CEO, which is, there's a lot of news about where the CSO or CISO should report. And in my opinion, we're doing the right thing. And it makes sense for the CEO to be directly involved in security. But he is forward-leaning and consolidated security under one roof, if you will, virtual, physical, facility, all security things under one banner, responsible for by one person, and that's me.
That's awesome. So, I mean, great background. What was the kind of catalyst for writing the article for Forbes, and how did that be?
Yeah, there's all this news about the talent gap, and to be truthful, I've from the very early days of trying to kickstart a cybersecurity business, although it wasn't called that we didn't call it cybersecurity in 1996. We called it computer security or network security or internet security, but jumpstarting that business, there just weren't enough people. The industry was very, very immature at the time. So for me, talent gap has always been an issue. And for the past few years, you see all these statistics about how many unfilled cybersecurity positions there are in your state or nationally or globally. And, quite frankly, I just think that everyone should take ownership of the problem instead of waiting for someone else to solve it. So if you think that the university system on its own is going to solve the problem, you're going to be waiting a very long time. And so my perspective is that everyone has a role to play, and corporate social responsibility is a way, as I thought about it, is a way for, as Telos, I mean, we do a number of things in the area of what I would consider corporate social responsibility. And maybe it's just open the eyes of other people, other organizations, to have them think the same way. There was that old adage, a rising tide lifts all ships. So the things that you do corporately may not always directly benefit you, but they'll benefit the industry, and things that other organizations do may not always benefit them, but they'll benefit the industry. If we're all working together to create more talent, then the pool of candidates becomes larger. And so to answer your question, I just got tired of, pardon my French, of all the bitching about the shortfall of talent. An article that would maybe help inspire people to take some ownership of the problem would be helpful.
Yeah, I think as I shared with you, right, for us as an organization, we've really looked at this a lot in line with what you're saying, but as a long-term and short-term approach, right? So short-term, universities, community colleges, boot camps, apprenticeship are all needed, right? The number is drastic. I don't know that any one thing is going to be our silver bullet and close the gap for companies like Telos to fill their roles. So, we all have to work collectively and to do that. And I think the long-term approach, and what I really liked about the corporate social responsibility side, is that it is, it's critical for us to get in front of middle school and high school students and say, hey, this is a career field. Like, this is an option. These are things that you could be doing now and learning as we go. And, for those youth that have the opportunity to go to college, they attend one of the universities or two-year program. And then for those that cannot, then they have other options like ours to jump into. So it was really well thought out and great. And I hope that, it is an inspiration for other companies to do similar stuff.
I hope so too. And just to your point about middle school and high school, there, to me, it really is, an overlooked area that needs to be addressed. And I'm probably not the only one who thinks this way, but rather than force a high school student to take 4 years of Latin or French or something, Java is another language. Why not allow programming to count as another foreign language? And now you have some usable skill in the cyber industry or otherwise, right? So anyways, I just think that someone needs to really take a hard look at the curriculum and figure out how to make skill building kind of academics part of the curriculum. It needs to start earlier than college, truthfully, and it probably needs to start earlier than high school. And some schools that have really gone to adhere to this 1 hour of coding good start, but it's not enough. I mean, for me, coding is the new VOTEC. If you're a good coder, you can find work and you can contribute to the industry without having to spend a ton of money going to school for 4 years. Not all jobs fall into that category, but coding is a hugely valuable skill. And I think that our school systems just need to start recognizing that.
For sure. I think I've said the foreign language code thing a few times over the last couple of years. That is a great option, right?
Yep.
I took 4 years of French, and I think I've said "we" in general in instances like this. But I've never really used the language, and I don't think either of our intent is to discourage, youth learning foreign languages and, ignoring the importance of, being cultured and, in the liberal arts aspect. But, the world is changing, technology is becoming forefront, roles are being automated. So it is important for us as a country to train people to be automation resilient and have jobs that are going to be here for the long term. You used a couple words in here that I think we all know, right? It's the elephant in the room. And I'm going to go off script from what I said before just a little bit, but some words in here around diversity, for workforce. And, we've seen the statistics. 11% of the workforce is represented by women and 13% of the workforce is represented by people of color. What are some things that you think we could do on our end to help change those numbers and make the industry as a whole a little less white male dominated?
Yeah, lead by example is one, right? Everyone look around your organization. Take inventory of what the demographic looks like. If there's a demographic that's underrepresented, figure it out. I mean, it's easier to attract women if you have women. Otherwise, the conversation can be awkward. People are suspicious, or whatever the case may be. I think you got to put your money where your mouth is. And my experience is it's much easier to attract women when they see other women as role models. Yeah, that's point one. Point two is this whole pay disparity, right? Equal pay for equal work, and that all the time, women are underpaid as compared to their male counterparts. So it might be that, the pay situation, or I don't see someone who looks like me in that field. The combination of those two things are causing women to look for jobs that historically they're more familiar with, right? And are pushed towards, or so. Teachers, which isn't bad. In fact, it's great. But if we really, we could do a lot by closing this gap. If it's 11%, like you just said, if the ratio was more like 50-50, think about how much the gap would close just by bringing more women into this environment.
Yeah.
So I think lead by example. People are inspired to see people who look like them, and then obviously you got to pay. The pay has to be equal and fair.
That's a great answer. We've interacted with a lot of employers over the last couple of years that would fit what we just talked about, right? A pretty male-dominated space. And I'm a genuinely curious person. So as we've had candidates or some of our staff that they've been interviewed or interact with those organizations, I just generally asked how they felt, right? And what they would do to be comfortable and fit into that environment. And I think it would be hard at first for a lot of them, but I feel like given opportunity, they would excel, right? And then, pave the way for others to follow suit. So next question is, what advice would you give, individuals or, women or people of color or anybody trying to get into the industry? What things would you have them, start doing today to really get into that career space?
Well, one of the things that I think is important to recognize is this cybersecurity industry is enormous. It's a very, the type of talent that's needed isn't just coding. It's not just pen testing. I mean, figure out, what floats your boat. Are you more interested in influencing policy, or are you more interested in security audit kind of work? Are you interested in developing the next generation of security widget? And so those are just some examples to illustrate how broad this field is. So figure out what makes sense for you. First of all, do some homework on the industry and recognize how broad it is, and that there's room for everyone, literally. And then figure out, I would say, how to engage with an organization to get some experience if you have none. Search out a mentor to help advise you to get into the industry. Seek out internships, seek out apprenticeships, or whatever the right terminology for that is moving forward. Self-study, there's so many things that you can do with certifications that would just, certifications at the end of the day are, not the end all and be all, but at least it provides a potential employer some comfort that there's some foundational knowledge of the industry that they're going to be working in. So in some cases, it takes a little bit of effort on the part of the candidate, but understanding the field and how broad it is, recognizing where in that field you think you fit the best, and then figuring out internship, apprenticeship, mentor, appropriate levels of self-study, certification. Some of it's free. Finding a mentor, I think, is like really important.
Yeah. I'm a big advocate of mentors, and I've had a lot of young folks come and ask if I would mentor them, and I generally say yes. I put some rules behind it, of course, of how that works out. But we had an intern leave yesterday, and I encouraged her the same thing. She's got a ton of potential. I said, you need to find a mentor, but the keys to any good mentor relationship is that you, as the mentee, you drive that time. You schedule and you follow up with your mentor, and then when you do get together, really be intentional about that and be mindful of what you're asking. So it's of value to both, right? And I think that's an important part of that mentor relationship. Yep. So the flip of this, right? And I'm gonna take a step back. So you a lot of things you referenced, like find your space. So for those that are listening, that are are really trying to figure out, okay, is this the space for me? The NIST Cybersecurity Workforce Framework is a really solid baseline to really see where what you just described is kind of this expansive industry. So that framework does a really good job of pointing somebody who would be wanting to dabble in the different spaces and learn where that would go. So a good website is cyberseek.org, SEEK.org. It was made by Burning Glass and the NIST organization, or NICE, and NICE, National Initiative of Cybersecurity Education. So a really good starting point to really see where you'd be at. So the flip from individuals is, what advice would you give to employers that are, looking to grow their pipeline, maybe be intentional about the type of the candidates they're tracking, and, getting folks to fill their roles? What advice would you give employers?
Stop looking for unicorns, right? You have this ideal description of what a candidate looks like, rather than stepping back and looking for, I think that there's a lot that you can do with someone who has determination, who has critical thinking skills, who has basic math skills, who has very good communication skills. I think that there's certain characteristics that I think if you just look for those and recognize someone who would be easy to teach, some aspect of the position, and it's not going to work in every case, I recognize that, but we've had great success here looking at people that don't fit the typical job description and some examples of that. And it's weird because I don't know what it is, but people who work in the restaurant industry who have this innate ability to multitask and deal with rapid fire sort of demands from the customer standpoint, have the ability to communicate with customers and make them happy. We've had great success transforming people who have worked in that industry and making them successful in the cybersecurity field. Not necessarily software developers, more on the analyst side, but like I said, the tent is huge and the requirements for different types of skills is very broad. And for many of the things that we need, those sorts of personal characteristics are very helpful. So I'm always on the lookout when I'm out to dinner or just when I'm interacting with people in retail environments. I'm always looking to see if this person is potentially underemployed and has more to offer, at least our industry. And so I engage them in conversation, and every so often it results in someone coming in, I'll use the word apprentice role, but to this point, we've had, anybody that we brought in through that mechanism, through those mechanisms we haven't let any of them go. They've all materialized. So you just have to be on the lookout for talent. You use the word unicorn when we talked on the phone. And so I'll use it back at you as I think as hiring organizations look outside of the job description as it's written, look for skills that you think can be leveraged in ways that can help your organization.
Yeah. I mean, I think the component of the unicorn is being driven by the sheer magnitude that you're understaffed, right? And so we finally, Rick does a great job. He convinces the CEO that they need to hire a new person, and they need that person that has a very specific, particular set of skills like Liam Neeson, right? They can step in, immediately do it. So it makes it hard to be open to, bring, somebody you just described that you found at a restaurant, and invest some time and energy in that person because, Joe, who's your manager, hiring manager, has got 45 tasks he's working on, and the ability to hire this next person allows Joe to take 10 tasks off his plate and do more. So yeah. I would never negate the importance of finding the unicorn, but I would also advocate and really be a big proponent that you could hire probably 2 non-unicorns for the price of 1 unicorn and really grow and build your staff organically and internally by investing some time and energy into that person. So I think it's just, I'm sorry, go ahead.
And they become unicorns.
Correct. Yeah. And I found, right. So it's funny. You talk about service industry. So our company relations manager, Mike, came from that background, right? He is incredibly passionate. He's, charismatic, right? He's a great conversationalist. He does a really good job, and he's got a desire because, he did work so hard for so many years in that space, and if you think of what somebody's dealing with in a retail environment with customers or in a service industry with customers, God bless them, right? There's no way that I couldn't do it. So, dealing with the high stress environment of a breach or an incident or whatever it may be, they're going to handle that stress really, really well. Yep. So I don't know, we've got about 5 or 6 more minutes, I think, to go. I'm interested. You had alluded to, you guys have jumped in a little bit and have attempted over the last year, to implement an apprenticeship into your organization. And you'd shared you'd had some ups and you'd had some downs, and it's worked out really well. But I'd love to hear, a little bit about that experience with you guys.
Yeah, well, it all started about 5 years ago with an internship program. And this year, I think we have 75 or 80 interns. The trouble with that, Tony, is that they're generally speaking high school, sophomore and above, and college kids. And so August 15th comes and all the internships go away. All the interns go away. our CEO, who I mentioned earlier, really forward-leaning on a number of these topics, said, it's great, but we're not going to see them again for a year. We have need now. We want to grow the talent, over the course of time as much as we can. What we need to do something that allows them to work more continuously with us. Sure. And so he used the term apprentice, which I understand, I agree with you, maybe has some stigma associated with it. And the stigma, and from my perspective and what I've seen here, is that it almost makes it sound like you're not quite an employee. And in some cases, we have people that come on in that status, and they're a little bit embarrassed by the moniker of apprentice, because it almost makes them seem like a different level of employee, and that's not the case at all. It just means that we're investing in learning and training. So to get back to your question, he challenged the organization to extend this internship program to also include apprentices, which requires a bigger investment on our part, but he understands the value. We're building skills. We identify someone who we think can really contribute to our company. They like us, we like them, and we make the investment in building skills that are helpful for them for long-term employment with us, and help knock out one of the job openings that we have on our careers page on our website. Yeah. So the catalyst really was internship is great, but going back to what you said when we first started, there's near term and there's long term. Internship is longer term because they got to finish college, and we got to hope that they come back to this area so that we can hire them if we had a mutual agreement about they want to work here and we want them to work for us, versus the more near term, which is the apprenticeship approach, which is they're actually working day to day with you, and you, as an organization, you're making the investment, and they're helping you solve day to day problems that you're dealing with.
Yeah, there's a lot of statistics out there. The value of apprenticeship, and by an organization making that investment in a longer term way than an internship, the amount of loyalty that is extended from that individual to the employer, because they are appreciative of that opportunity that was given, and in a space where turnover is high, right? There's a huge demand. There's a lot of big salaries being thrown around. So a lot of times employers are really struggling to keep somebody for longer than 2 to 3 years. They're going to, spend some time, get them a higher level of certification, or get them trained on a particular set of skills, and then they leave because those are really marketable and valuable to another organization. So we've seen through our apprenticeship is that those individuals seem to be a little more loyal, have a little more staying power, if you will, than some of those employees, because they are appreciative of just that opportunity they were given. So
yeah.
So kind of last nugget, I'd love to hear if you have any final thoughts, words of wisdom, anything that you'd provide for those that are listening, of things to do, maybe, going forward, and a suggestion you'd have for everybody.
Maybe just to foot stomp what we've talked about is that it's really interesting to see the statistics about how many open jobs there are and how many there are going to be by 2025 or whatever. But I would say don't fixate on that. I would say that take the bull by the horns and try to figure out what you can do to help yourself. And if more of us do that, the number of candidates that are available to all of us, it's logical that pool is going to increase. So, don't get caught in the trap of just admiring this problem that we see in the press all the time about vacancies and so forth, and how bad it's going to get. And, don't dwell on that. It's interesting to understand it, but if you believe that it's true, then you have a responsibility to take some action. And that was really the point of the article, without being too crabby or whiny. It was really that was intended to be more of a call to action. identifying some of the things that we're doing, and I'm sure that we could do more, but maybe my hope was that it would instigate a dialogue where people would say, oh, and here's some things that we're doing. Or I hadn't thought of that, but we'll put some of these things into practice. So the article was really mostly intended to help move people beyond the mindset of panic and encourage them to take some ownership and be proactive.
Yeah. Well, Rick, I appreciate your time today. I appreciate you being, a voice, right? And when I read the article, none of it gleamed to me as, as a naysayer, right? It was all a positive thing of like, hey, this is a really solid way for an organization to jump in. So, I appreciate your leadership and voice, that I hope others will take note of. And I think, really set an example for companies, big or small, right? Like none of this seemed to me is not a major lift, right? So it's a little shift in your hiring practices. It's encouraging volunteerism for your employees to go into school. So like all things most want to do, right? The most individuals I've met that are the hacker folks that really love this space want to teach others how to do it because they want to see it. They want to see the craft grow. So, I just want to say thanks for that. And again, I appreciate your time today and hope this is, the first of many podcasts and conversations that we have, about things like this. I appreciate your willingness to be our first day. And then, thanks again for your time.
Tony, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Rick.
Bye now.